and welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news, discussion, and, of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's work in the Cosmere. I am your host, but I am not Eric. I am Grace, and I have killed Eric and taken over the role of host for Shardcast.
No!
And joining me today is Marvin.
Hi, I'm Paleo.
Also joining me today is Danielle.
FelCandy.
And I'm a spoopy Shardcast producer ghost, Eric! Woo! Who might, rarely interject, but mostly to tell these guys, hey, stop talking over each other! And, see, Grace, I like what you did on the intro, because that will show that it's not just me going crazy on the intro. It's just that when everyone does the intro, you get very excited with energy, and it's fun, right?
Oh man, it's like I'm in the Cosmere. I can almost hear the voices of the people I killed in my ears. For some news, the Way of Kings leatherbound Kickstarter is out. And it's going really well. All of the 2020 deliveries of the leatherbound are totally sold out, but you can still support and get a version that'll be delivered in 2021.
We actually managed to fund the campaign within 3 minutes of its launch. $250,000 or something like that in 3 minutes, and nobody expected it, and nobody was able to catch up to... Isaac wasn't able to catch up on updating all the stretch goals. But by now we're at a little over $5 million in backing. And just today, I think they updated the stretch goals to include the drafts of the new novella that Brandon will be writing at 5.5 million.
I have actually not funded this yet because I am annoyed that the only way I know I can get this novella day of release is if I pre-order it before it's even been written. And I trust Brandon will write it, but I don't really want to spend money on something that hasn't actually been written yet.
Shardcast Ghost agrees. I wanted the swags, you know.
Yeah, the swag is the nice part.
Brandon has announced that Rhythm of War will be about 6,000 words longer than Oathbringer.
Brandon, all my books. Yeah, I plan to write shorter books, Sanderson.
Yeah.
He's not good at doing that. And that's that word count is after he cuts 10% of the book, so he's already trimmed it down from the previous word count, so it's still longer than Oathbringer. Yeah.
I still trust him to make a nice comprehensive story. Yeah. I don't have a problem with it.
It better be comprehensive at that way.
And we have some Lost Metal news.
So Lost Metal is planned to begin on January 2021, turned in July, and then hopefully a release for spring or summer 2022. So longer than I wanted, but we'll take what we can get.
Yeah.
All right, so now for the actual topic. We got a new Rhythm of War excerpt in the most recent Brandon newsletter. And that is what this episode is going to be talking about. So if you don't want Rhythm of War spoilers, bow out now. The excerpt we got was a Sulfrena Interlude. So that is what we're going to be talking about, because there is a lot of super interesting stuff in there.
It's really exciting that we finally get a proper Spren POV, not just the Radiance perspective on everything. That's in itself already really nice, and the stuff we have in the interlude is top-notch information.
Nice to read from her perspective anyways, because she's so sweet and so kind and upbeat, and I really needed that right now. So I really, really loved this whole excerpt. It was just uplifting.
If the excerpt is any indication, then we're not going to be getting a lot of that from the Kaladin point of views.
Yeah.
So
right.
good to get that where we can.
Yeah. Okay, so to give a quick summary of the interlude, basically it's, as we said, it's from Syl's point of view, and she's at Urithiru, and it's ahead of a high storm coming. She's basically flying around Urithiru, and first she visits or goes to see Cord, Rock's daughter. Next up, the high storm comes, and she gets to see the Stormfather and asks him about basically help to understand Kaladin, because Kaladin is in a bit of a rough spot right now, apparently. More so than usual, maybe. And then after the high storm, she goes to see Dalinar and talks with him about also Kaladin, but also his powers as a bondsmith and how he could help maybe with Syl's and Kaladin's relationship.
So there is a lot to unpack in this interlude. So we're going to go real deep into the topics that are talked about in here. So Danielle, what was the most interesting thing that stood out to you in this interlude?
Well, goodness, what? There are so many different things, but for me, I loved reading from Syl's perspective and seeing how her personality shows in her own words, how she is talking about having two different brains, her child brain, and how she feels different from the other high spren, the other honor spren, and except for Rua, which kind of made me laugh a little bit. And then she sees the other spren as being not quite as smart, and she wants to help them achieve her level of intelligence. I think that's what it makes me feel like she's kind of going for, not only with Kaladin, but with the other spren. Also, audio listeners, I am so sorry. My dog is barking and I have her out of the room, but you might hear her. She just wants to give her opinions too.
I think what was the interesting bit about Syl's perspective was that she talks about having she feels like she has two brains, one that is easily distracted and one that is more responsible. And apparently, I can't personally relate to this, but other people have mentioned that really fits their perception, or like their perception, and they have ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And so apparently, and just from an outsider perspective, maybe it's also seemed like, yeah, that's definitely something that you could ascribe to Syl, reading that interlude. And yeah, it's really cool to see how Brandon has decided and has managed to portray that in this interlude, because that people who have ADHD, that they can relate to it. It's really nice to see.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering when reading about her two brains if Syl has always felt like this, even when she was bonded to her previous Radiant, or if it's something that kind of developed as a result of her sleep and is only something she has now with Kaladin that she's woken up.
Yeah, she did say that she had felt like a darkness when her previous Radiant had died, and then she lost her memories between that time. What was that, 10,000 years? Something?
A little less, probably, because it was before the Recreants, just before the Recreants, so less than
2,500.
2,500 years apart.
Oh, that's
right. That was really cool to see, because she has her two brains sort of a comparison, and she also applies that to Kaladin and his depression, and that he calls his depression more or less, she calls it the dark brain, and then uses that comparison again to describe her state after her Radiant's death. So that makes me wonder whether that generally is something that Spren experienced that way. Like, she calls it the pain, and that's what she felt after the Radiant died, and whether every Spren is like that, or if it's something unique to her or to a few of them.
The Stormfather definitely seems to think that she is getting too close and letting herself feel too much for these humans that she's bonding. He might not feel the same. He's also way more powerful than her, though. So
makes it seem like he wants the Radiant Spren to have more autonomy and be not bound to humans, but be allies to humans, to be considered, their own thing, rather than just my Spren. They are a Spren.
I liked that Syl, when she and the Stormfather were talking, said that Roshar was for Spren humans and singers.
Mm-hmm. And like the Stormfather before that said it's their world, and that she answered that the Stormfather has a bit of a weird perspective on Roshar, maybe, like after how many years of humans and singers being there, you could say, yeah, maybe it's not just our world.
All right, so one thing that I found interesting in this chapter was we got a lot of really interesting bondsmith information. Dalinar asks Syl what she knows of his powers. We get a paragraph filled with lots of information. So I'm just going to read this paragraph aloud because there's so much. It's easier than trying to summarize what she says. Your abilities are what made the original Oath Pact, she said. And they existed and were named long before the Knights Radiant were founded. A bondsmith connected the heralds to Braze, made them immortal, and locked our enemies away. A bondsmith bound other surges and brought humans to Roshar, fleeing their dying world. A bondsmith created, or at least discovered, the Nahel bond. The ability of Spren and humans to join together into something better. You connect things, Dalinar. Realms, ideas, people.
I feel like we've almost have to go through that word by word because there's so much. I think already in the first sentence, she calls it, your abilities are what made the original Oath Pact, which seems to imply there are other Oath Pacts maybe, or a new one or something like that. So what's that about?
Well, we know Ishar was called the Binder of Gods. So we know we already knew that he was involved, but I think this implies that he's maybe a lot more involved and a lot more instrumental in that than we've thought previously. One line that stood out to me was, a bondsmith bound other surges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No clue what to make of that. Like it's obviously speaking about how they fled from Ashen, but and we know, I think, that they use the mechanics that are sort of like the Oathgate in how they work, but how a bondsmith did it alone, basically, apparently, I have no clue.
It makes me wonder if it was a different thing originally, and then the surges kind of defined it a different way when they got there. Almost like how light weaving was a Yolish term, and then they kind of adapted that term, possibly.
Yeah, it's like they say it was named long before, and I could totally see it being like a Yolish thing, and maybe because Syl also says like you connect things, that it's just a general term for everybody who manipulates connection in some way, and on a deeper level maybe. And like that also makes me wonder or question whether the bond she always only says a bondsmith did something, whether that was all one bondsmith or separate ones, and I certainly think it was multiple.
Yeah, one thing that I thought of is maybe bound other surges is referring to like binding them to the honor blades somehow.
But I don't think that would work for the honor blades, but it would be a little like they have to bound them, or they have bound them before that because they used it to get off Ashen, and at least unless the timeline is completely wrong, they got the honor blades after arriving on Roshar, but definitely could be that as well, that like Honor gave them the swords and a bondsmith, probably Isha, but maybe somebody else.
The way that sentence reads, a bondsmith bound other surges and brought humans to Roshar, fleeing their dying world. It sounds like they bound the surges to Roshar and brought humans to Roshar. That's how I read it, but I'm not sure if that's exactly the right way to interpret it.
It's definitely a way you could read it, I think.
Well, we know surges were used to destroy Ashen.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like if they were, I don't know how like surges would be like uncontrolled and destroy a planet, and then a bondsmith comes in and binds them so that they no longer can do that or something. I don't know.
Maybe it's like very wild theory territory, but maybe they used the rampaging surges on Ashen to sort of jumpstart the portal or whatever to get to Rosha. Like they used all that investiture or whatever that was raging there and channeled it sort of, or used it to kick off another thing that they used then to get to Rosha, maybe something like that. They bound it in that way. Like we know so little about the exodus from Ashen, and it's really hard to extrapolate from like that one sentence what might have happened.
It's also kind of interesting when she says the ability of Spren and humans to join together into something better. That's like her interpretation, because we just had the Stormfather saying you're supposed to be separate. And she's taking it as we're joining everything together. And that's why she's kind of appealing to Dalinar.
Yeah.
That actually makes me wonder, like, just how much of that is Syl interpreting what she knows, and how much is actual fact. That especially that line with the join together into something better makes I think that
it's kind
a
of
lot
an
of
opinion.
It's not that reliable maybe to trust her 100%. But yeah, to maybe get back to that, like they were named, or Bondsmith were named long before the Knights raided. Maybe, and we know that honor played a huge part in well, basically all of what's happening on Rosha. And so my mind sort of went to that, maybe, especially if we think like that Bondsmith was a Yolish term, that maybe Tenevest before the Ascension, or maybe even after the Ascension, that you could sort of peg honor as a bondsmith, as a shard, something like that, like because he is very focused on bonds and connection of people, sort of. So maybe
like Tenevast as a Yolish bondsmith.
Yeah, something like that. We know, or we don't know, but it would make sense maybe for the original vessels to have some sort of qualification for picking up the shards, and not just say, we want to kill God, let's do it. Would fit maybe.
So a bondsmith created, or at least discovered, the Nahel bonds. You know, that line makes me think of that one epigraph about Ishar saying that he would bind the new surge binders to rules or precepts, or else he would go and destroy them all the next day.
But I feel like that talks more about the later on, when they formed the Knights Radiant, after they had already discovered the Nile Bond.
But I don't know, what the connection I made there was like, well, if a bondsmith created the Nahel bonds, maybe Ishar, as a bondsmith, could destroy it if they refused to like be bound by his rules.
Yeah, that is it certainly would fit their power set. Like Syl also talks to him about maybe strengthening their bond, like Cal's and hers, and it would make sense for that to also go in the negative direction, sort of, and lessen their bond and maybe even break it. You could definitely see that, yeah. Also regarding that discovering the Nahal bond line, do we think that it was actually a bondsmith who formed the first Nahal bond, like with one of the big three Spren? Or do we think they just sort of noticed that somebody else had done it? Because I find it unlikely, or at least I'd find it weird if the Stormfather, the Night Watcher, or the sibling were the first to be bonded to a human, because that sort of seems very big.
Maybe that happened at the same time that they were binding the surges and humans and all of that. Maybe during all of that, this is when they discovered or created. She still doesn't know, so maybe all of these things kind of happened around the same time. This time of like discovery.
I also imagine that the other Nahel Bond Spren are newer, like younger than those like big three Sprens, so it also comes down to when were they created in relation to these first bonds and what happened first. I don't know. And this wasn't mentioned in the paragraph, but Syl does seem to think that Dalinar, as a bondsmith, has the power to make her feel what Kaladin feels.
Mhm.
Very interesting.
But Dalinar actually doesn't know whether he can, so...
Do you have something you wanted to say, Danielle?
Oh, I was just thinking about like when Syl's talking about the origin of the higher spren, and they're newer than the lesser. So did they come about for any particular reason? Are they just mimicking the spren that were originally on Roshar? And did this bondsmith kind of push that along?
Yeah.
There I do think that like the creation of the higher spren, like the honor spren and others like that, definitely precedes humans arriving
Mhm.
on Roshar, because that like probably Honor did that, and like when he arrived, he thought, "Hey, look, there's Adonalsium left behind spren here. Maybe we should add some of our own." So he created other spren, but then the interesting question is whether they are actually new, or whether they are just sort of that's also something still wonders, whether they are sort of uplifted lower spren, like if honor spren are maybe just wind spren that are sort of endowed with intelligence or higher intelligence.
There's a line somewhere about the heralds being surprised at the Nahel bond, and the spren trying to mimic honor blades, and them not being surprised by that power. So how does that relate to this line of a bondsmith creating? Or I suppose in that case it would be discovering the Nahel bonds.
Yeah.
I guess that would imply that maybe the bondsmith was the first one to bond a spren. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like that is the weird thing, because first the heralds were surprised, so I don't think that the bondsmith to create or discover it was Isha, because that wouldn't fit that surprise. Yeah, but then I find it weird that like a bondsmith, or that the first search binder, so to speak, who bonded a spren was a bondsmith, because I don't personally see the Stormfather going and saying, "Hey, let's form a bond."
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean they're the first one. They could have been experimenting. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards, is that they were experimenting with the spren. And also when Syl was saying that she felt a kinship with them, even though they're clearly different, they're not as smart. She wanted to help them become smart. And it makes me think maybe they were experimenting on these spren, and then they happened upon maybe an honor spren or something, and they discovered or created that bond.
I like that, yeah. But do you think then that it was Isha who is that bondsmith, or like somebody else who they also called a bondsmith?
I mean, the way that she phrases in that paragraph, she doesn't say a bondsmith did this and then he did this. She said a bondsmith does this, a bondsmith does this. So it's very vague in how you can interpret it. It could be the same bondsmith that did it all, or it could be just a group of them, or 3 of them. Who knows?
So with the bondsmith ability to strengthen Nahel bonds, apparently, do we think that Dalinar is necessary to help if Maya or any other dead spren gets revived? Somehow he could strengthen that bond and help that along. That's one thing I thought of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't think it would be necessary for a bondsmith to intervene there, but it probably would help if they can figure out how to do it. Like, Dana obviously doesn't seem to have the knowledge, and I'm not sure whether the Stormfather would be willing to hand that out, considering how he doesn't want the spren and humans to, like, he describes this as spren formerly being appendages to their human, like that they're very secondary, and he definitely doesn't want that, and I don't see him facilitating that.
Yeah, he says, you refuse to admit that you are more than an appendage to a human. Spren once let themselves become consumed by the needs of the Radiance, and that killed them. So he's looking after Syl by saying, don't get too invested in this. Don't become consumed by his
invested.
needs.
See, I'm a cognitive shadow, so I can make those jokes.
Yeah.
There's also someone mentioned in a couple of Dalinar's visions named Harkylane, who is implied to have some ability to one, know when a desolation is coming, and two, is the person suggested to go to when Dalinar claims to have trouble with his shard plate. So do we think he's a bondsmith and maybe like they suggested going to Harky Lane to like strengthen the bond so the shard plate works again?
I think the assumption up until now was that he was a bondsmith, or that they were a bondsmith, like generally. And with that new interlude, I definitely see that and subscribe to that. Like somebody on the Discord described that sort of as the bondsmith being the therapists for all the Radiants, and I really like that idea.
Or like spren doctors.
They're like the relationship therapy for spren and humans. Like if you and your spren have an issue you need to talk out, you go to the bondsmith and he'll strengthen your bond.
I'll strengthen your bond.
You just need Dalinar to figure it out. Otherwise, or maybe another bondsmith. Do we have anything else? Like I find it really hard to interpret that whole bondsmith paragraph because it's so dense, but also so little we know about all the stuff. Like they also say he connected the herald, or a bondsmith connected the heralds to Brace, made them immortal, and locked our enemies away. And that, to me, or more or less obviously speaks about Isha. But then again, we know that it was Honor who, or we thought up until now that Honor did most of that, like that he created the Oath Pact as like the magic behind it, and that Isha was sort of just the initiator, maybe. But this paragraph definitely makes it sound like it was all that bondsmith who did it.
Or maybe it's just spren mythology or spren oral history or something where it's passed down.
Maybe it's just the wisdom of Tessim or whatever his name in 2K is, and like his law he built around himself.
Yeah, reading this paragraph, if Ishar did even most of the stuff, then him calling himself a god's starting to seem a lot more justified.
Yeah. Maybe Binder of Gods doesn't refer to him sort of making oath with shards, but maybe that he literally would be able to bind them and like restrict them because he's so powerful.
All right, Marvin, what else stood out to you in this interlude?
And obviously, because you also brought up Harkelane, we know Syl visits Cord, and she remarks that Cord has Shardplate, and she also says that she didn't feel the same way she did about Shardplates, although the Shardplate is still a bunch of corpses, and apparently these corpses are content with their situation. So that also, it was like one paragraph or two sentences, and it also like basically confirmed that cousin spren theory, more or less, for how Shardplate or what Shardplate consists of, and it destroyed all the other theories. And like, that's definitely Brendan trying to tease us, I think.
What were your Shardplate theories before and now after?
Theory was that Shardplate was a type of lesser spren. I don't like to say lesser; it makes me feel mean. Lesser spren
and subspren, you know.
Subspren is even worse. No, it just it makes me. So I thought originally that Shardplate was made of lesser spren, and they were connected to the high spren that would form their blade. So, like, I had this idea that Syl and then the little glory spren would form the armor of Kaladin, but then it didn't happen.
I think that definitely was foreshadowing already. Or at that point, I also thought it was foreshadowing him getting played with all the windspren swirling around him, and like when
windspren
joining him, Windspren would be the bondsmith. Would be the bondsmith probably. And I didn't really have a theory of my own for Shardplate before this, but I definitely could see the cousin spren theory working out. A lot of people complain about how they have a problem now with why these spren would be content with the situation, or how it works. Like, we know that Shardplate regenerates, But I think those are definitely concerns that can be explained away. So I'm fine with this explanation that like it's sort of a conglomerate of cousin spren that coalesce in the physical realm to form plate. Yeah.
I never thought about it too much, but I agreed with the cousin spren theory. I saw on Discord after this came out, someone, I don't remember who, basically wonder if these cousin spren were almost a type of like squire for the spren, like how the humans have squires who get their powers. It's like, oh, the spren also has like little wind spren squires who get the ability to come into the physical realm, and maybe, which I kind of like that idea, because it just seems nice. I don't know.
I think, yeah, that fits with Syl wondering whether she could make Windspren smarter. Like that, like she gets her own sort of little squad of Windspren who she can command around maybe to now you found plate. And yeah, I'd like that as well. It would be really cool.
Makes me wonder if the shard plate is made of a bunch of content corpses. Maybe they're just content because they're protecting the person wearing it, and then when they're used as a blade, they're screaming and they're not okay with the wielder going into battle or having to use that weapon.
I can, because the proper Radiant Spren, their purpose wasn't just to become a Shardblade and help kill other people. Meanwhile, the cousin Spren sort of, they had found their new purpose being under, or like helping the Radiant and the Spren by forming plate, and I could definitely see that as like that's why they're content, because they are just fulfilling their purpose, and because they're probably not as intelligent as the proper Radiant Spren, they, after becoming part of the plate, they didn't have the capacity maybe to think of doing something else again, and so like, yeah, okay, I'm fine with this, and all's good.
Yeah, like we know with Wendell that not every spren likes killing people. But if you're just protecting someone, then maybe there's not that same level of anger. Because you're still protecting someone. I don't know.
Well, Syl had mentioned that she was remembering her old wonderful knight. What was his name?
Relador.
Relador. And he spent most of his life traveling to little villages, using her to cut cisterns, aqueducts. So, I mean, maybe the sword thing is just like a war society's way of interpreting their use. They're not thinking of using them to cut cisterns and aqueducts. Or, using them as tools to help rather than to hurt.
I mean, realistically, outside of the desolations, like, you're not going to have a society that doesn't just want to, like, straight up murder people isn't going to use their shard blades as blades.
But that's not the Alethi.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see that Oathbringer isn't, the sword Oathbringer doesn't scream as loudly or as much in agony when Danielle picks it up. And that could, like, he did a lot of killing with that sword, but maybe like he had a change later in life and sort of he followed the codes and things like that, and so
he gave it up.
He gave it up. Yeah, maybe. And was it with Oathbringer that he actually did cut like the latrine trench or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
And it was with he used Oathbringer to help him there. And like I could see that because so Oathbringer sort of saw that for one he didn't just he used it not just for killing and like gave it more of a purpose, and he also gave it up, and that sort of freed it from him, and like nobody I guess Celias wanted it, I don't know, but I could definitely see that being like just they have fulfilled their purpose and that's why they are content.
And I think there is also the connection to be made to Fabrials and Spren trapped in the gemstones. I don't think we know if Spren and Fabrials are content with that. But I mean, we do know that like they, even though they're trapped, they get like an unlimited supply of food, which Spren and Shardplate kind of do as well. So
sad because nobody wants to be enslaved, even if it's for a good purpose. You don't want to be trapped somewhere forever. So it's kind of a morality thing.
Well, I think in the books, they were kind of compared to chulls and like harnessing them to drive a cart. I'm sure in Rhythm of War we'll get more into that because it seems like Rhythm of War is going to have a lot of Fabrial info.
Yeah, like Fabrial arms race, something like that. I really like that. And it helps Navani become more of a prominent character, so that's always good.
Yes, she needs more.
But like, because you bring up Fabrials, the thing is that I see is like modern Fabrials work by entrapping Spren in gemstones and sort of forcing them to work for the ray or for the effect of the Fabrial. But ancient Fabrials, like the Soul Casters or the Regeneration Fabrial that Nale uses, they don't seem to operate that way. They seem to be more of a, like, what I personally subscribe to is sort of that there are Spren involved, and like we see in the Casa interlude, I think that she has some help from someone in her soul casting, and that maybe it's sort of a Spren is not directly bound to the Fabrial or anything like that, but they sort of are voluntarily helping because they get stormlight in return or something like that, and sort of it's more of it's not a slavery relationship, but instead like they're just happy to help and
symbiotic.
Yeah,
it's their job.
Sense. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I work this Fabrial for you, and you pay me in stormlight.
Slavery relationship.
Like I could see that, and that might also apply to the
shard plate.
The shard plate here. Yeah, that it's the Spren were willing to do this, and they don't have as much of the shock of the recreants, maybe because like it was their job to protect. They saw it more as a job rather than like their calling. Like the Radiant Spren saw it more of a calling, or they really were involved with stuff, and the lesser Spren were just, okay, this is what I do.
Yeah. And there might be less of like a direct betrayal involved in that if the Spren in the shard plate weren't as like emotionally involved with the Radiants themselves. Like with the shard blades, there's very much like I trusted you and you killed me and betrayed me and turned your back on everything you used to believe in. Whereas with the shard plate, it might be like, well, I was helping you out and you screwed me over, but it's not as much of a betrayal.
But what is interesting is that there are still corpses, or as much as a corpse, as much of a corpse as a Spren can be. Like they definitely did die, and I wonder whether they would appear as sort of if they appear in the cognitive realm at all, because like if for example a Windrunner's shard plate is indeed Wind Spren, we know that they are hardly in the cognitive at all. Like whether plate appears in the cognitive, and if they appear in the cognitive, how would that manifest? Like would they also be dead eyes, or because aren't they like sort of streaks of light or something like that? The Wind Spren in the cognitive realm, and so how would they manifest as corpses in the cognitive?
Yeah, and so but if they are cousin Spren, how do they just like you can regenerate an entire set of plate from a tiny speck? And the fact that they're corpses, it makes that really interesting. Like you're regrowing a corpse, or essentially. Yeah,
it's really weird, and like I think that's a problem that many people have with the cousin Spren theory. That regeneration sort of is a huge problem.
Maybe it's just that their bodies aren't regenerating. It's their existence, or I don't know what the word would be. Their mind, their contentedness is getting some kind of energy from maybe the cognitive realm or something, and it just takes some time to come back. And then they arrive back in their contented dead state.
Yeah, but I came up with maybe sort of when that came up in discussions about this interlude was that maybe because we know that it requires a lot of stormlight to regrow a plate from parts of it, and that maybe and we know that Spren regenerate or are invigorated by the stormlight, and like when the highest storm passes, we see them sort of standing up straight and stuff like that in the cognitive realm, and maybe it's that the because they are not radiant spren, the stormlight can actually help them sort of revive to a certain extent. Like it's it's easier than with Maya, for example. They just mostly need stormlight to get to a certain state again, and for anything further, they also need something else. So, but I don't know how you go about reviving the cousin spren, because there's not a radiant to form a bond there. So maybe the spren has to sort of initiate that. That's another topic, maybe. But yeah, I think that might be an explanation, that like they take the stormlight and it helps them regenerate to a certain extent, but they can't be fully alive again.
Or maybe they're not really regenerating so much as the other pieces, when you regrow plate, like crumble to dust. So maybe it's something like the stormlight is like pulling the spren that are further away, like through the cognitive back to where the piece is, or something weird like that.
That would work, because we know that like when you drop a bead in or when you take a bead in Shadesmar somewhere and then sort of drop it, it eventually finds its way back to where it sort of more or less is in the physical realm. So I could also see that working, yeah.
Deadeyes will find where their blade is in the physical realm and the cognitive one if they have to. So like maybe whatever the Deadeyes equivalent are like grouping together somewhere in the cognitive, and the stormlight like pulls them back into the physical or something weird like that.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense because like mass is conserved and investiture is conserved, so it's not like the plate is just gone. It just sort of the pieces are
converted into something else.
Yeah, so it would make sense. It just finds its way. Yeah, I like that idea. Could definitely see that as an explanation.
Danielle, what else stood out to you in this that you want to talk about?
I want to talk about where Kaladin is at this interlude. Syl goes to visit him. He's sleeping. He's sleeping during this high storm, and
big lug.
that big lug. But he's sleeping, and she's wondering about will he be satisfied with his job as a surgeon. So I'm wondering if we know something happened from reading this, that Dalinar forced him to go and become a surgeon. Something happened that caused his dark brain to kind of push him over the edge or something, and forced him to take a break and be useful still, but in a different capacity. And it makes me think, the way that she phrased it makes me think that maybe he's okay with his life right now as a surgeon, but she's worried about his future and how his dark brain, his depression might affect him as he's a surgeon rather than out on the front lines or, with his squad.
Yeah, how is he going to build a squad now as a surgeon? Really have like a lot of nurses.
Medical assistants. He'll get a bunch of like assistants, and then
he'll have nurses.
What do we think made or caused sort of Kaladin's period of depression, or like resurgence of his depression? Like we know at the beginning, or like the you already have the Lyrian chapter. It's chapter 1. It's preview, and like he finds Kaladin there under among the refugees. And so maybe something happens to Lyrian.
Lyrian dies, part 1.
Do we know where in Rhythm of War this interlude is going to be? Is it like one of the first ones?
We don't know. I think people have been assuming it's in the first set, though.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've been thinking. At least.
It doesn't feel like too much has happened yet in the book. Sort of like. One arc, or one part of an arc is maybe complete because Kaladin is back to Urithiru, but it's not further into the book. So I definitely could see it having something to do with Lyrian, but whether he's dead or... Because then it would be sort of really ironic to then put him up to surgeon duty after his father.
Do we think this interlude is just a single interlude, or do we think Syl is going to have multiple, or even like the through-line interlude novella?
Oh, I hope she has so many. I love reading her perspective. It's just precious.
I'd really love it if it was all Syl, but I could also see maybe all the, like, we get a viewpoint from Pattern and others as well, like Windle, like we get one from each spren in all the interludes maybe that I could also see, but I'd really love it if Syl was all the way through.
I kind of liked the idea, because I think before this, I was certainly assuming that Kaladin would be in the, like, some kind of Kholinar arc. But after reading this, I was kind of wondering if maybe Kaladin will be in the, like, that third arc where he kind of takes a step back and you only really see, like, the overarching of what's happening, and then maybe get more of that through, like, a Syl novella through line of her trying to help him.
I think that would work really well to, like, for one, we finally get, like, some real spren viewpoints and experience what they feel like, and it also helps sort of give another perspective on Kaladin, because, like, always seeing his view of the world also doesn't always help with understanding him, I guess. Do we think that Kaladin has sworn his fourth ideal at this point?
I want to say no, but I could see a world in which him swearing the fourth oath and kind of having to come to terms with that pushes him, like, even further into this depressive state.
It could make it like he swears it, and afterwards he realizes, but it didn't really help that I swore it. Like, bad stuff still happened, and that is what drives him further into his depression. I could definitely see something like that.
Yeah, like, there's some implications that the oath is like, oh, you can't save everyone, so he swears that, and he knows he can't save everyone, and he's not going to try. But because of that, it kind of makes him feel, like, worse about himself. Sort of like what happened to Shallan after she, like, swore the oath about what happened with her mother. Like, now that she has to face that head on, it's, like, made her, like, psychological issues a little, like, temporarily worse as she deals with it.
It's interesting to see how Syl is dealing with his psychological issues, and she's so worried about him, and she's just racking her brain to figure out a solution, and she doesn't feel like this solution is to just force him to be a surgeon. He could be satisfied, but it's not going to fix what she views as a problem. He would continue to have the dark brain. This wasn't a solution. She needed a solution. And this is what the Stormfather, again, is kind of warning her about. Like, she's letting it consume her.
Yeah. I'm really worried for Kaladin and
me too.
the War, because
when I first was reading this and I read that Syl wanted to be able to feel Kaladin's depression, my gut reaction of, like, this is not going to go well if she does. Just seems like a bad idea, and I'm glad Dalinar said no to that request.
Yeah.
Dalinar is kind of the dad figure, even to Syl. Like, you don't know what you're asking for. Trust me.
Like, Syl tries to mother Kaladin a little there, so he would be the grandfather for Kaladin in this scenario. So, yeah.
And Syl certainly seems to think that Kaladin will be the champion.
Yes.
That too. Yeah.
He must be on the forums and Discord and agreeing our theories. I mean, we don't even know what the contest of champions is going to look like, so it's hard to say whether or not she'll be right. Stormfather has his doubts.
Yeah, but it is interesting to see that the champion business seems to be going forward, like that it wasn't just sort of like they tried in Oathbringer, that didn't work. They'll still continue to sort of make that idea work. But who will be the champion? No.
So when Syl visits her father in the High Storm, got some interesting comments about like investiture and time and so
the music
apparently
of the storm too.
Yeah, that's true.
Apparently, when too much investiture congregates in one place, time behaves weirdly. So I guess I'm not like I don't know much about this, but I guess it's like almost like a black hole, like too much matter in one place
it's like
time behaves weirdly.
relativistic effects sort of going on there.
Yup.
I also don't know too much physics, but it's
This is the cognitive shadow of Eric being grumpy, but that this is a thing.
If it is working like that, I don't know how she can just go into it and then come out of it so easily. If there's something there that's changing time, there's got to be something going on with how she can just quickly go into the storm, go into that black area, and then just pause, have a chit chat with Dad, and then leave.
And it's not only that we see Syl going to that sort of in-between place, maybe in between time. We also see it with happening with Kaladin and Delena as well. And for somebody who has actual mass and time being warped around them, that would probably behave a little weirdly. And we don't see that at all. So how that works?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as much of a relativistic effect, but instead, like she also says that the realms become porous, and that maybe it's just sort of you get temporarily more of a spiritual awareness, sort of, and so it all happens more or less in the spiritual realm or something like that. Maybe that would get rid of the normal physics and Bran can handwave it.
Or like I was thinking maybe there's just sort of like essentially a mini speed bubble going on, where it's like time is faster in there than it is outside, and then she leaves and like the Stormfather stops burning cadmium or whatever it is.
It would make sort of sense with the relativistic effects, because we all know that investiture is sort of equivalent to mass and energy, but yeah.
You know, as Danielle was saying earlier, Syl experiences the high storm as music. We've said before that, or it's been said before that the rhythms are described as like the rhythms of Roshar, and the singers can feel them in kind of the natural elements of the world. So do you think that's what she's hearing almost?
I mean, yeah, I think it has to be related to the rhythms, because like they're so omnipresent on Roshar, more or less, and like we also see that the like Tamba has a certain, or she communicates with Venli via the rhythms, and so maybe all Spren have more or less of an affinity maybe for the rhythms, and so Syl just recognizes it as music. But we know that the Lightspren or the Reachers, they use it also, or they use vibrations on the metal of their ship sort of for communication. So maybe they have a deeper understanding of the rhythms, and they can actually discern them. So they know that it's the rhythm of, I don't know, the storm or whatever. And Syl just knows, okay, it's music to me.
It's the rhythm of war.
Well, she also mentions music when she's talking about her childlike brain. She says, if there's music on the horizon, she'll dart back and forth, eager with anticipation. And she also mentioned that when she heard the storm, she was dancing with the Windspren in anticipation. But what are they anticipating? It's almost like it's a crescendo and it's coming up to a climax and they're all getting ready, but then the riddance come and it's over.
I think that definitely could work for all. We know that a lot of creatures are symbiotic with Spren on Roshar, and so maybe they all get that, or we know that the plants retract their leaves and stuff like that. So maybe they all get that information through Spren, who recognize the rhythms and know that a storm is coming. That would like push that to 11, like that everything is sort of relying on Spren and connected on Roshar.
All right. What else do you want to talk about, Marvin?
I think, like we talked about how how Shardplate might work, but we sort of glossed over that Cord has Shardplate, and she's the first Horn Eater to have it in a very long time. And I wonder how she got her Shardplate.
Well, didn't Rock kill Amaram?
Oh, right.
I assumed he gave the shards to, I guess, his kids. We don't know who has the blade. Probably
forgot that.
Doesn't Cord have like a twin brother or something, or an older brother?
Yeah.
We gotta try pronouncing her name.
Hualim Luna Naki Akilu.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that was easy.
Nailed it.
Hualina Luna Naki Akilu.
I love that it's a poem of a wedding ring. I just thought that was really sweet. And poems have their own rhythms too. It's just it all connects to music and harmony and beats.
Yeah, then I also sort of like, because she mentions music and stuff like that, it's funny that Richardium, the horses, have apparently music spren as their symbiotic relationship. And maybe that's also sort of an expression because the horses came from Ashen, and so they don't have as deep a connection to Rosha as the native fauna. And so maybe they get the easy spren sort of to bond, and the native animals get the more connected ones. Yeah. That would be a fun
theory that they drew the music spren by having their stone hooves beating a beat on the ground, and that's what the music spren were drawn to.
Yeah. I've always liked the idea that in the Stormlight Archive, we're going to at some point see humans start to be able to hear the rhythms and recognize them in the world around them. It's kind of a thematic connection to like when they first came, like they couldn't hear the rhythms and they didn't belong. Now they've been here for thousands of years and like they're starting to belong and like they can start to hear those.
Yeah, anyone with the singer blood in them can attune to it a little bit.
Speaking of singer blood, and speaking of Cord, she also apparently has inherited the ability to see spren all the time from Rock. Yeah. And so just seems to be that ability is in fact genetic. Like people sometimes thought that maybe something was special about Rock, but it speaks for the fact that it's just their singer blood expressing there.
Yeah, that's always interested me when Syl is able to show herself to people or make herself invisible. All of them are. And she talked to when she was talking to Dalinar, she said something about how she was surprised that he didn't spook when she just appeared out of nowhere, because a lot of humans find her disturbing. And she also said they seem to find her more disturbing than a glory spren, which I don't know why she would specifically call them out, but it's just interesting that the regular spren are not really able to just make themselves invisible. I guess they just are there, but Syl and Pattern and all of those. Well, is Pattern able to?
Well, no,
he's not. He's not. So I wonder why Syl is able to do that.
And Windle, in turn, is like almost not capable of coming fully into the physical, or like just showing him to others. I think.
Yeah,
like he's very cognitive.
Yeah, I always kind of assumed that was almost just like genetic differences, or like the spren equivalent of genetic differences between the different types.
Yeah, I could see that.
Where they're more inclined to stay, and how easy it is for them to like be in the cognitive versus the physical and jump between and make themselves visible and stuff.
Makes me wonder if Rock would be able to see Windle. Have we seen him see Windle?
Oh, I think they've met.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to.
Do I think Cord, this chapter makes it seem like she's going to be more important, maybe in like the back half with the kind of second generation?
I'd love that. She just has to learn Alethi properly, and then she can become more of a major character. And like she's cooking in that interlude, So maybe she also took on some of her father's responsibilities for Bridge 4 because he has to do windrunnery stuff now, and she is now helping them out with cooking and things like that.
There's another instance of music when she poured the potatoes into the water, and Syl was like, "Oh, what's that music?"
Why people are probably more spooked by Honest Bren showing up than Glorious Bren is maybe just because they the Honest Bren, or when she appears to people, she might appear as humanoid, and so they are just spooked by seeing a little person rather than just some golden sphere or something like that, what the Glorious Bren appears. So maybe it's just like very trivial that they simply
to us it would probably be like if a squirrel just started talking to us or something. Be like, what's going on? Like, this is crazy. Get away from me.
But I mean, in Way of Kings, Kaladin, when he was first meeting Syl, she appeared to him as leaves falling, and then as a little girl, and he wasn't really that spooked by it. I don't remember him feeling like it was some disturbing thing. He was just like, oh, they mimic voices sometimes. Yeah. So it just seemed like a strange line that people find.
Maybe there's also some expectations involved, like he just thought she was another Windspren, so he explained away the behavior, but now it's like widely known that these Honor Spren and like Sapient Spren exist, so people are like more who aren't exposed to them as much are like jump and shocked when they first see them. Still have a few more things in the chapter. We have Syl remembers Iritharu from before the Recreants when it was still turned on. She.
Oh god.
Oh, did not remember like that. She remembers the tower being bright with a strange kind of light.
My first thought when I read that, I just pictured the whole tower like a Christmas tree with lights around it. But it's got to be something other than gemstones and stormlight. Like if it seems strange to her, then it has to be something else, like electricity.
Well, there's those like gemstone strata like in the walls. Maybe it's like, because I mean, I think there's a difference between like just glowing gems and lamps around the thing versus like veins of glowing light throughout the tower.
Oh no, she says that they're bright with lights and not just bright with the light, because it would also be strange if like the light came from nowhere, sort of. Like everything was just bright without anything really glowing or giving off the light. That would also be something, but I don't know how that would work.
A lot of people on Discord seem to think that it was the third light, the cultivation light.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that.
That's what I also thought of when I read A Strange Kind of Light was because we know that void light isn't quite a color, like it's violet-ish, but it's actually like a Stygian color, and that means it's not a real color. It's sort of
like a negative.
Because, it's difficult to describe, but so maybe it's something like that just as well. Like it's just a color you can't really describe, or the light is weird. It's not really that.
Does that illuminate anything though? Like, I don't know if it casts off a light, like a violet light or something, you know?
That I don't know. Yeah.
The other thing I thought of was that maybe the light sort of came from the sibling somehow. And I don't know, like the same way the storm glows. I don't know. The sibling has like a weird
alive,
light.
The tower.
Glow. Yeah.
What some people compared it to what I think Elantris, because when Elantris was still working, or after it's working again, it had or it glowed, or the stone itself seemed to glow, and maybe it's just something that it's investiture leaking or something like that, because it's so strongly invested everything that it glows. But why it would be strange then, I don't know.
We also get a new Spren name. We have Peak Spren.
Yeah, are those for stone words?
I think a lot of people have assumed that.
You should
Or believe
spell
it.
out peak spren, so it's
Ah.
not like peak as in I'm spying on
Oh,
people.
yeah.
That might be good.
Not pervert spren.
I'll see your theory when it's turned on.
Oh,
It's
no.
Sydney has a
Peak
fetish
Spren.
for a peak spren, yeah.
Peak Spren as in PEAK, like a mountain peak, which I think is where people are getting the Stoneward connection from, and also we don't know. They're like the one we don't know.
Yeah, like we don't know, I think, Truth Watcher and Stoneward, and for Truth Watcher, I think the common theory is that they are the Keen Spren that Windle mentions at some point. But they are higher Spren that we know. Like, Syl mentions them alongside the Honor Spren and High Spren, I think.
Mhm.
But, yeah. And Peak would sort of fit Stonewards, I think.
Kind of like the idea that it's like peak as in like the peak of what Spren should be, and it's just the bondsmith, like the 3 bondsmith Spren. I kind of doubt that though.
Yeah, that would be weird because she also mentions it when she says like the higher Spren were created 10,000 years ago and so, and the Stonefather in some form probably exists before that. So
Wait, did they say 10,000 years ago for the higher spren?
she did so. Yeah, I think she said like they are newer, about 10,000 years old or something.
Okay, great, cool.
I think that's about it. Everything we wanted to cover.
It's definitely worth a read. You just have to subscribe to Brandon's newsletter, and if you don't receive it, try it with another email address because it seems to be having some issues.
Yeah, the spooky producer ghost can never make them ever send to his main 2 emails. So, but on the 3rd email that I tried, it worked. So I'm sorry. But you're not the only one if you don't get it. But it mostly kind of works.
And so, yeah. There will be tour preview chapters like there were before Oathbringer, but those will not be full Shardcast episodes like this was. There will be something, though, like some kind of reactions to them.
And that's also something they mentioned in the Kickstarter live stream, I think, that the preview chapters are coming soon-ish. So might be already out when this video goes live, I don't know.
All right, listeners, you know what time it is. It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? This character is from Roshar.
Menace. Tien.
Tom.
Braze.
Void in drag on a horse.
It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Caw.
All right, listeners, here's how the game is played. You send an email to wtcc@17shard.com with a character and 5 clues corresponding to that character. I read each one aloud, and after each clue, our panelists have a chance to guess who's that Cosmere character. Is disembodied producer voice playing?
I don't know. Unless I like really know, and then I'm like, oh man. I'm just excited to see how Danielle will do. Well, how are you feeling, Danielle, about that?
I'm not feeling great. But everybody can have a chance to laugh at me, so that's okay.
Yeah, I might.
Maybe I won't come up.
I might. I guess I could have put myself in the panel, but that sounds like work. So you're gonna be disembodied producer voice. So there you go.
Okay, clue 1. This character has killed people on screen.
Sadius.
It is not Sadius.
Vin.
It is not Vin. Clue 2. Several characters are afraid of them.
Dalinar.
It is not Dalinar.
The Lord Ruler.
It is not the Lord Ruler.
I like that guess, by the way. That was a solid guess.
Clue 3. This character is known by an epithet or pseudonym.
Lord Ruler. Oh, that's such a good one.
Is it Vesha?
It is not Vasher.
Oh my god.
I have a good guess, I think, but I'm gonna just wait. This is the stage where I stare at my books for inspiration, Danielle.
Yeah,
so,
like,
I highly
behind
recommend. That's okay. That's okay.
Odium.
It's not Odium. Clue 4. This character was present at the Battle of Thalen Field.
Oh, my guess goes away. I was gonna guess Kelsier.
Could
He's
you
known as the
read the
Sovereign.
first clue again?
This character has killed people on screen.
Kaladin.
It is not Kaladin.
Oh, I do know who it is.
Is it the Thrill?
It is not the
Nagawa?
Thrill.
Okay, because it didn't really kill anybody, but it drove people to.
Can I give
Guess
a
not.
spoopy producer guess?
Go for it.
Nightblood.
It is Nightblood.
That's
Ding,
a good
ding,
one.
Ding, ding.
Yeah.
Clue 5 is that this character is not human.
That would have given it away.
So in case listeners don't know, Nightblood is not that thing's original name, and we have no idea what the original name is. That's what gave it away.
That was submitted by Nolam.
Good job. That was a good one.
I do really love the lore that what Nightblood's original name is. I really want to know that. That's like top tier secrets there. Also, I strongly think Brandon should make book 5 even 500,000 words long, because book 5. So that would be very Voron, you know?
That's still a pretty big jump, though, from, that'd be like a 40,000 word jump. Which,
Yeah, it'll be good.
Add a novella to the end of it.
Yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, it could be like an extended epilogue, because it's like the end. So, you know.
Book's gonna be wider than it is tall. Okay, you guys, I have to tell you this. I just learned it while we're all together. My husband just finished Dark One.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
so proud of him.
And is that his first Cosmere?
No, he actually read Mistborn 1.
Cosmere.
Yeah, not
yeah,
Cosmere. Brandon.
He's read Mistborn, Skyward, and Starsight all this year.
Nice.
I'm very proud of him. He's never read a book before this year, ever.
Whoa.
Wow,
You know, that sounds like some really fun couples content on 17 Shard.
Yeah.
YouTube.com/17Shard.
All right, this next one was sent in by Sashimine Smith.
Yep, that's the one.
On the forums. Look, these names are hard to read.
Yep, that person.
I can't pronounce the character names correctly. How am I supposed to pronounce forum names
man.
correctly? Okay, clue 1. This character is frugal.
I actually have to Google that word because.
Oh, that's fair. That is fair. That is a fair use of Googling on this show when you don't know the English.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is acceptable.
I wasn't sure whether it was rich or like he big spender or the reverse. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Vivenna.
It is not Vivenna.
Just because I don't have a clue. Farfen.
It is not Falcon.
Doesn't work at all.
Ridger. Sorry.
Alright. Clue 2. This character was involved in a treacherous conspiracy.
Stump.
It is not Stump.
I have no clue. I know Danlan or whatever her name is.
It is not Danlan.
Okay.
Producer Ghost thinks it's Dachshund.
It is not Dachshund.
Oh, okay. All right.
It was a good one, though. It's a good guess.
Yeah.
It is treacherous. They're
All right.
scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Clue 3. This character has been engaged twice.
Danielle, your face on this is just the best. This is the best.
I'm like, how is this not Vivenna? I don't get it.
Who else has Vivenna been engaged to?
Oh, yeah, that's true, I guess.
Vasher.
God.
No, let's not go there.
I mostly say this to troll Jess. To be honest.
Thinking I can't. I literally have no names in my brain right now.
Who was engaged twice?
Yeah. Wasn't like,
I mean,
usually
That
the
could-
arranged marriages work out.
It's It's a good point. It's a solid point.
You can also pass if you're really.
Yeah, he's just gonna guess clubs.
It is not clubs.
Wax.
It is not wax. I feel like Ian is like yelling at the screen right now.
Probably.
It's
just go to the next
one.
Okay, clue 4. This character was betrayed by a close friend.
What is his name? Can I describe?
I'll be generous to you too if you
You guys suck so bad at who's that Cosmere.
So bad.
The Elantrian Lord, the old Elantrian Lord who has a fake engagement to Serene or something like that.
That's a good one.
Yes, that is who he is, and his
Duke
name
Royal.
is
Riadon or something like that. Royale, right? Okay.
Oh, I would never have guessed that.
Royale, or however it's Royale.
I say royal.
Yeah, I say royal too.
I'm not doing this Aeonic pronunciation. And it should be noted that neither does Brandon, and people in the live stream were like, he doesn't pronounce it Serene. I'm like, no, he's never done that. So, like, if you feel like, I'm sorry, I'm just copying Brandon, okay?
And the 5th clue is this character's second wedding was interrupted.
That's a good one. That was solid.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that one too. Good job. Person whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce again.
I just want to say that when you said that Ian would be furious right now, is actually, I would presume his screen was the giveaway for me because it must have been an Elantrian character.
Yeah, I did think about that, and I was like, well, we'll see if they are.
Yeah.
But, no. All right. Follow us on 17shard.com for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our stuff, you can support us on Patreon. We'll see you all next time for more Dark One analysis and Way of Kings Prime stuff eventually. See you next time.
Bye.
Caw.
We were joking that Kalden's the space whales would be all doctors. And then Paleo had a great joke too.
Yeah, because there's wops on. I said that the space whales will be on as porpoises.
It's terrible. I wish I wasn't here to hear that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, what were we talking about?
Paladin as a surgeon with his nurses, Bridge
I'm a
4
porpoise.
nurses.